Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. It was a very busy weekend, and we also uploaded a very important show which actually sums up our situation in the present. It was called Anti-5G Group Libelled by Press and Council, in brackets Glastonbury UK, because that's where it occurred. And it all revolved around a false allegation made about a group of protesters who were protesting against 5G in a very jovial way at a mayoral parade, where the mayor appeared from the church, and indeed so did the Sea Cadets. We have the footage which shows that there was no abuse hurled at the Sea Cadets, and this was the headline which appeared in Somerset Live. Abuse hurled at teenage Sea Cadets by 5G protesters during Glastonbury parade. Well, we've now proved that this is totally unfounded, and it brings into perspective what we're dealing with on a bigger scale, because the newspapers can print these libelous statements which are made on behalf and by the police, and they can repeat it under what is known as qualified privilege. Well, we've proved in this case that as the allegations were untrue, they have little to back up the use of qualified privilege. They were unqualified in this case and printed libelous headlines whilst not being in possession of the facts. So please do check out that show. It's called Anti-5G Group Libelled by Press and Council, in brackets Glastonbury UK. I had to upload it to YouTube because it's got some visuals in, obviously, for obvious reasons. So this was also referred to, this incident, or this alleged incident, this non-incident, was also referred to in a council meeting, which was stated by members of the council to undermine members of a group. And we've got to remember that we're having these clown show pantomimes about people trying to get their local council to stop 5G, which has already been rolled out. And there is a kind of bit of a misinformation game going. But let's get back to this, just for anyone who hasn't watched that particular show. This abuse was allegedly reported to the police, this abuse of the Sea Cadets, who then put out this biased and indeed libelous headline and statement in the online publication Somerset Live, which is part of this large newspaper group. You'll have these in your area, and we've already proved that this newspaper group have done this before. They've reprinted libel by the police. So this is an expected but very worrying thing for some people who may not know about it. But as we've been dealing with it for so long, it's no surprise to me or people who listen regularly to this show. The headline, 5G protesters hurl abuse, was published. Yes, a group of teenage Sea Cadets, it said in the article, was subject to verbal abuse while taking part in a mayor's parade in Glastonbury, according to police. Well, whoever came forward to the police needs to be prosecuted now or rebuked, and we are asking for some kind of compensation for the 5G group from the police, the council, and of course the newspaper. We'll be getting onto that in the next few days. But I've reported on the press and police before, and this is why it's important. The rest is just a distraction. A lot of what's going on is a huge distraction. Now, the show gives an interesting example of libel by police, press and council, so do listen to it. And the use of newspapers to defame groups and individuals by the press using this term qualified privilege, which I think we've actually debunked in this particular case. In other cases, it may be different, but in this case, it cannot be proven that this was not malicious. This was not a malicious libel, a malicious slander that was reported to the police. So it was allegedly the parents of a 13-year-old boy who reported this to the police. So we'd like to know who they are. We may never find out, but it would be interesting if these people could also be made liable for their libel. So the proof is in the show along with the video footage, so do have a look, and it's clearly libel and nothing more or less by both the police, the press, and of course council members who reiterated this in public to the public, which is slander. Okay, so following our show, Glastonbury Festival and 5G rollout, all this happened. And this show looked at the defamation of the group opposing 5G in Glastonbury, and the Somerset Live online publication, as we've just said, printed this libellous headline and untrue story. They didn't say allegedly, you see. They actually stated that it had happened. Big mistake. But most of the conspiracy circus, all these kind of people getting lost in the detail, which isn't important, they don't want the truth. They just want to be heard and be seen to be virtuous. So we stick to the facts, and a lot of these people don't like it. There are also fantasists out there still talking about common law courts. Now, this really is the world of Judge Unicorn and the self-appointed jury of 12 imaginary leprechauns. This is absolute lunacy, and it's for people who have no concept of reality. But getting back to the content of that show, the allegations of someone shouting abuse at sea cadets at a mayoral parade in Glastonbury has now been proved to be false and libellous, yes, by Windows on the World. So, news just in, let's move on. The Manchester Evening News states that Rochdale has declared a climate change emergency. This is in the Manchester Evening News today. Bosses say the effects are being felt in the town. So the climate emergency is being felt in Rochdale. Well, isn't it strange that it's not being felt anywhere else? So maybe Rochdale is the centre of the forthcoming apocalypse. Now, I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing. But it says here, we are in a state of emergency. Sea levels are rising. Temperature, what, in Rochdale? Sea levels are rising in Rochdale. Temperatures are rising across the globe. Pollution is the highest it has ever been. Wait a minute. No, sea levels aren't rising. Not that much anyway. Temperatures are rising across the globe. No, they're not. Pollution is not the highest it has ever been. Anyone who can remember the 1950s, our older listeners, will know that this is a bunch of tosh. Pollution in the 1950s and 60s was very much worse than it is now. London is absolutely clean these days. And of course, you've now got mums for lungs saying, my children have got asthma because of the pollution. No, your children have got asthma because they've got weak chests. Get them to do more swimming, get them to do more outdoor activities, that sort of thing. It does help. Even singing practice, all these things, bit of discipline. Sorry, I'm not trivialising the effects of asthma there. But we have to trivialise some things, don't we? Town hall chiefs, it carries on, have committed to making the borough carbon neutral by 2038, 12 years earlier than the target set by the government. And it has a photo which features a placard which is being held. And this placard is definitely from the Greta Thunberg and Al Gore School of Logical Thinking and Local Democracy. Basically, it says that it's the world is the hottest, is hotter than Liam Gallagher was in the 90s. I mean, the planet is hotter than Liam Gallagher in the 90s. I mean, this is absolutely childlike mental illness, but never mind. It's totalitarian brainwashing, which is actually unsurpassed in world history. That's what it is. Now, the problem here is obvious. If people are going to believe that they have local input, this latest clown show that we've put out should do the trick, along with many of our other shows, which prove that there is no local input or no national input to what's going on. You do not count. It's those that count the votes what count. But this is the biggest brainwashing exercise in world history. There's no doubt the climate taxation agenda has to be the litmus test for how the public will enslave themselves without actually throwing themselves over cliffs to erase their carbon footprints. It is only when the public find out that they have no choice that they will know the truth and that they are in fact living in totalitarianism. But some of them are finding out. The Brexit avoidance strategy, yes, enforced through the May regime, was quite revealing, but still the public think that the useful idiots are actually in charge. They do generally. Listen to talk radio, like LBC, and there's a general belief that there is somehow something which makes the UK a democratic safe haven. The public still think that the likes of Boris Johnson are actually going to be in charge of anything, and that the likes of him or somehow, or him or her or them, are somehow going to deliver something on behalf of the public. The fall of Jeremy Corbyn was engineered in plain sight through media propaganda, but the public still argue over right and left. The truth is that the Conservative Party are just as totalitarian left as they are fake right. They are implementing globalist policies to take away all your rights, just like the left, the extreme left. They have no choice in the matter, and neither do the public, as long as they are led to their own ruin through these implanted beliefs. Now, the UK is just a tyranny, but it's got a good PR system, and through the clown media and its wafflers, seems to work in all situations, from Brexit to the latest pantomime to implicate Iran. Anyone who does more than 5 minutes of research will know that. They'll know that, as far as the only democracy in the Middle East goes, the UK and Israeli intelligence work seamlessly together. Just ask anyone in the military, and if they have served anywhere, they will tell you the same thing, that their wars are our wars. We have no choice. The useless English aristocracy. I wanted to talk about this, actually, because this is a good one. The useless English aristocracy still spout antiquated cliches about the rule of law and our democratic system, whilst they have, over the last few generations, just lost everything. They just haven't admitted it yet. Losing face does not come easily to those brought up to assume authority, and this is a huge problem in the United Kingdom, formerly known as Britain. But this type of social Darwinism and the public school system has hastened their downfall. And in reality, they fell a long time ago. Their indoctrination centres on Oxford and Cambridge. These are the centres of indoctrination. And they reveal this clearly. It doesn't matter whether it's either of these or Eton. None of it will prepare the mind for reality. The reality that they are just cogs in a global action plan and educated for that reason and that reason only. Now, for instance, what about the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg? He may still dribble out literate and intelligent-sounding cliches, but in reality, they have no idea, people like him, about the exterior world. These artificial wombs that they live in are insulated by special privilege, and unlike most of their class, they still have money. It won't take long for all the wealth to be grabbed, though. It's a good job they can keep some offshore, as the UK PLC, under the direction of its overlords, is taking the lot, and this is the important point. The lower classes fare no better, and the growing underclass are now finding out how things really work. The amount of Europeans who are homeless, or Britons who are homeless on the streets of London, is absolutely shocking. I have people telling me this all the time, and I've seen it myself. Go and have a look at the top of Tottenham Court Road any night of the week. But the so-called middle classes are the worst. Entitled and enfeebled minions. They're just absolutely enfeebled to fashion and trivia, and they spout everything they are told from a hive mind of group consensus. It's frightening. They're crippled by political correctness and self-conscious superiority, and absolutely overwhelmed by anything outside their media-implanted corridor of accepted opinion. You know, the corridor of accepted opinion, the one that's put into the media every day of the week, and no one's allowed to defer or even disagree or even, heaven forbid, bring forth a contra-review. I want to start off with a quote that I did on that little press for tonight's show that I put out yesterday, and actually go into this in a bit more detail. It's a great bit of summation of what's going on from Antonius Aquinas. Yeah, we started this on last night's show. The idea of rule by the people is a scam, one perpetuated by those who in actuality are in control of the government. Through the so-called democratic process of voting and elections, a small, determined minority can impose its will despite majority opposition. The natural system of law needs to be upheld, and only the truth can save the day. This is actually what I've put into this, and that's what I really wanted to talk about. It carries on. Popular democracy has always been condemned and feared by most thinkers since the beginning of human societies. Look at the socially engineered way this century has evolved. Look at some of those socially engineered principles that have been brought in that we've covered on the show. Look at places like the Tavistock Institute, which put all this stuff into the media. We've now got the updated version of the Tavistock, which goes everywhere. The British Psychological Society and, of course, Demos, all these think tanks and NGOs are a shadow government. They influence the government. They tell the government what to do because they have overlords. Popular democracy has always been condemned and feared by most thinkers. It's very true. Prior to the democratic age, most of the learned understood that democracy would result in mob rule and the displacement of natural authority with demagogues. In short, the worst would rise to the top, as the author describes the characteristics of a contemporary politician. That's really interesting. Since the advent of modern democracy, the principal benefactor of its rule has been the state and the politically connected financial elites, who are in actuality the true rulers of societies. Instead of putting an end to the supposedly despotic rule of the ancient regime, which democracy's proponents claim to have existed throughout the monarchical and aristocratic age, governance by the people has instead witnessed an increase in state power and control of individual lives to an unprecedented level in human history. Few, if any, Pope, Emperor, King, Prince or Duke have ever possessed such suzerainty. Okay, now this is very true. I was listening to Bill Cooper, a 10-hour lecture from many years ago, and he was talking about what we are talking about now. He was talking about it then. He was warning his audience of what was to come, and yes, it's happened. It was already happening then. Take a look at the late Bill Cooper and listen and learn, because some of his stuff was prophetic, but he knew what he was talking about. He had the same sources as we have. He had the same sources as you have. He wasn't an extraordinary person. He was a person with extraordinary knowledge, and that is incredibly important. So in contrast, it carries on to what has been taught in classrooms, on university campuses, and espoused throughout the media. Individual rights and freedoms were far better guarded in the age prior to democracy's ascendancy. Pre-revolutionary Europe had social structures which insulated individuals from state power far more effectively than under modern democracy, modern totalitarianism as it is now. So he says, in conclusion, the most likely scenario, if there is to be a change in Western democratic life, will be from a worldwide economic crisis and collapse of the financial system, which will render the nation states unable to meet their financial obligations to their citizens. All economies, well, let's just interrupt this for a minute, because this is what the World Bank and the IMF are already doing. All economies are hopelessly indebted from their welfare state excesses and can never hope to meet their promises, which now runs in trillions. What will emerge in the aftermath of a collapse is hard to predict, but some form of authoritarianism is likely, which will be centred on a one-world state with a single irredeemable currency. While the financial demise of Western-style democracy will be evident for all to see, its ideological underpinnings, which have justified its existence, need to be extirpated. Any hope of it being reconstituted to better serve the people needs to be shot down. Now, it carries on just to finish. There is no better place to start the demystification of democracy than with Christophe Buffon de Choiseul's magnificent The End of Democracy. I'll be looking into that one. But yes, what I wanted to talk about is natural law in a post-truth world, which is the name of a new talk that I'm giving. Because truth and facts are contrary to the current post-truth world. This is what all of these shows recently have been about, especially this one about newspapers reprinting press releases that are from hearsay and put down as reality. The whole of the clown media is beyond a joke, and it's not funny if you get caught up in it, and I have been caught up in it, and then it becomes extremely sinister. But there are remedies. But truth and facts are contrary to the current post-truth world. The role of natural law in combating the now entirely corrupted and ever more controlling system can bring remedy, and I've proved it. We have proved this. The present post-truth and administrative system now removes or tramples on our rights. I want to share some experiences, insights, and most importantly, solutions into the system of control, which is being ever more tightly imposed, and also how and why the current system still holds solutions. That's what I'm going to talk about in this talk, which is called Natural Law in a Post-Truth World. Truth is now heretical. Now remember, the literal meaning of heretic is one who is able to choose. Nothing's really changed. In the 1500s, there was an act which was brought in which made the Roman Church the supreme power. And if you disagreed with the Eucharist being the flesh and blood of Christ, in other words, if you didn't believe that wine and bread being administered by a priest in a church did not literally turn into the blood and flesh of Christ, you were a heretic. And the act was also known as an act abolishing diversity in opinions. So what we've got now, the online harms paper, hate speak, it's all the same thing. However, in the 1500s, there was not the infrastructure that there is now to keep those who are on this farm in place. There were fewer people actually running the show. But now, of course, we've got Google. So the ever-narrowing corridor of accepted opinion belief keeps out critical thought and facts in favour of an imposed consensus reality. You know that word, consensus, the one we all have to come to, which just means that we are made to agree, or in reality, it's made to look as if we agree. Because you don't need a majority, you just need group consensus, which is actually created and manufactured. So when there is no truth, there is no natural law and no natural justice. So the purpose of this presentation that I want to give and take up and down the country is to explain in simple terms the system we operate in with practical examples of how and why it works. None of this is about opinion or belief or even religious faith. All these, though, are contributing factors in the management of human resources, which is all it is. It's just a business plan. But we've covered in depth how the entire planet is being steered into this new form of totalitarianism under a global action plan which removes individual rights in favour of group consensus or the common good or social justice or social equity. These are just deceptive terms which in effect remove all inalienable rights, not inalienable as they say, as some say, but inalienable rights which cannot be leaned. Rights which cannot be leaned and have debt placed on them. So we are faced with this ever more remote authority and an increasing technocracy, removing as much remedy as possible. However, there is still remedy built into the present system, and that is what we have to exploit. A legal maxim states, ignorance of the law is no excuse. However, we now have ignorance of reality, where opinion and belief are more important than fact. The system is now so corrupted that evidence is routinely ignored, destroyed, and kept out of court. And this is something which the public will not believe until it happens to them, and it's happened to many. 55.5% of examined cases, even by the HMIC Inspectorate and the CPS Inspectorate, which is their own gatekeepers, found that essential defence evidence was being withheld, and they class it as unused material. Look into that one. Just put that in from 2017, HMIC report, 55.5% of examined cases. Essential defence evidence withheld, in my case, destroyed. This is a case I've been working on for 3 years. Check that out, Crime Farming in Kent at windowsontheworld.net. But from the golden rule of law to administrative maritime law, and the poor laws to council tax, and the ever-increasing creation of debt, and the now unjust court system, we also looked at the liabilities of the person, and most importantly, remedies in law. Now, we've got to remember that the Latin word ver, ver, means truth or true, that which is true or in accordance with fact or reality, which is the opposite of the public servants and the post-truth world and the clown media. Natural law. Let's see what natural law is, because this is an immensely important thing. It's something that's inbuilt into everything. It's inbuilt into how everything works in nature. Natural law is based on observable truth. Natural justice, let's have a look what that is. English law system, a doctrine that protects against arbitrary exercise of power by ensuring fair play. The ancient trust law forms all agreements made by an oath between parties. Trust law is actually about the oldest form of law on the planet. In fact, we do cover that in the talks, and I certainly will be covering that in this talk. So the post-truth world, what is it? The description of the post-truth world, which was a phrase of the year in 2016, I think that was actually in The Guardian, where else? That's the most post-truth publication on the planet apart from the New York Times, I think. Post-truth world, relating to a situation in which people are more likely to accept an argument based on their emotions and beliefs rather than one based on facts. The results of that is, yes, Extinction Rebellion. That's the latest clown show of the post-truth world. But now on to the detail. Let's get into that. The taxation of all for fear of an apocalypse which is not even predicted. That's what we started the show with, that story from the Manchester Evening News that Rochdale has now declared a climate emergency and wants to be carbon free by 2038. Don't be moving there. They will be removing your carbon and your footprint. But this shows the earth is indeed a farm, and its inhabitants are someone else's property. Well, they must be, mustn't they? But more later on the use of the fake protest group Extinction Rebellion to implement the zero carbon agenda announced by the pathetic Theresa May in the dying hours of her regime, while she cried at her ineptitude in the underground bunker whilst being instructed by her fellow parasites. That's my kind of description of what went on there, by the way. But this says it all. There is no choice. Well, there's one choice. No choice. And right on cue from the UK Guardian, the Stasi mouthpiece, comes the latest announcement, which is part of the global totalitarian master plan. The overpopulated hive cities, no private transport or freedom of movement, a zero economy. Wait for it. Wait for this headline. This is what Extinction Rebellion, on behalf of the United Nations and the Global Action Plan, have been lobbying for. Your enslavement and your restriction. Here's the headline. Air travellers may have to pay carbon charge to offset emissions. Well, may means must. Air travellers must have to pay carbon charge to offset emissions. Planned tax will make public more aware of climate harm caused by flying. Ministers hope. So if you think that these idiots in government are going to protect you from this or have your best interest at heart, they don't. And it's never been more obvious than now, has it? So these ministers hope that they can destroy your right of travel, which has now become a privilege. Wait a minute, where else was the right of travel a privilege? Oh, it's a bit like the old Soviet Union, where only useful party members and the elite will get out from behind their very own, yes, your very own Iron Curtain. It carries on. Air passengers may have to pay an extra carbon charge on flights as part of a government initiative to reduce CO2 emissions and tackle the climate crisis. Crisis? What crisis? Oh yes, the one that Extinction Rebellion told them to announce, the one which has never and will never happen unless we're hit by an asteroid or a comet. However, let's get back to this. It says passengers could choose to pay more for travel tickets, which would then be used to offset greenhouse gas emissions. Now, bearing in mind the amount of tax that's on an airline ticket, go and check. It's at least half, if not 2/3 tax already. It says, or the scheme could work on an opt-out basis, which means you've got no choice, and also be applied to trains, buses and ferries. This is the Stasi coming at you. It's going to be so expensive to travel. And remember, they're going to ban cars. So how are you going to get anywhere? You're not. You're going to live in your smart city by 2050. Your own carbon footprint extinction plan, all deducted at source. Ministers hope the plans will raise awareness, it says. Oh, they'll raise awareness, will they? About the effects of public transport on the environment. Well, aren't they telling us that we should use public transport? I'm getting a bit confused here. This is absolutely so obvious what's going on now. The things that we've been talking about for years. It's all here, on steroids, as they say. The extra funds could be used to spearhead eco-friendly projects, such as planting trees to reduce the carbon footprint. By all means do that, but don't tell us that it's reducing anyone's carbon footprint. Virtue signalling will get you everywhere. Yes, that's the point, isn't it? The government said it hoped the initiative would drive consumer choices towards less polluting journey options, which is Chairman Mao speak for you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay where you are. Well, that's it. However, the Transport Secretary Chris Grayling has launched a call for evidence on offsetting carbon emissions produced by public transport. In addition, the government has expressed concerns consumers may not trust that their payments are supporting worthwhile causes. Well, they got that right, but the readers of The Guardian will lap it up as their modern equivalent of Benefice, brownie points for heaven, another branch of the global asset stripping department. Yes, the Benefice department. Yes, pay for your sins, and everything will be okay. Grayling said on Thursday, climate change affects every one of us. Bit of a sweeping statement, that one, isn't it? Well, I suppose it does. It rains sometimes, doesn't it? Get the odd bit of snow. Climate change affects every one of us, and we are committed to ensuring that transport plays its part in delivering net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, when this useful idiot nose-in-trough piece of trash won't be here. Heathrow's expansion plans make a mockery of the zero emissions strategy. It was said an offsetting scheme could help inform travellers about how much carbon their journey produces and provide the opportunity to fund schemes like tree planting. Yeah, we've already had that red herring to compensate for those emissions. Now, if you look on your airline ticket, it already tells you how much carbon you're meant to be using. It's absolutely absurd. It's clown show time. It's ridiculous. However, our focus remains to target the development, production and uptake of zero-emission technology across all modes of transport, which means no transport, you know. You are fully aware that that's not going to work, aren't you? You are fully aware of that. Yes, okay, just checking. Your nose in the trough, mindless, bootlicking, self-interested waste of space, Chris Grayling. A report by the Department of Transport said, one way to increase uptake could be to follow an opt-out rather than opt-in model, under which the cost of offsetting carbon emissions would be automatically included for consumers. Yes, it's compulsory, folks. You ain't going nowhere. In the past year, a third of carbon dioxide emissions, it says, came from transport alone in the UK. It's because we've got the lowest emissions, I think, in Europe. So this is absolutely absurd anyway. You know, the ultra-low emission zone going as far as Croydon. Sorry, I mentioned the C word. And two-thirds of this carbon dioxide emissions came from the mouths of those imposing it. They're talking of crap all day long. I've just got this news story from New Zealand, which is from rnz.co.nz. It says, government under fire for how it released climate change report. This was posted at 6:30 a.m. on 22nd of July 2019. It's by Eric Freichberg. It says, this has come after criticism the Zero Carbon Bill was introduced to Parliament before a report by the Interim Climate Change Committee was revealed. Oh, just for a change, they didn't tell anyone. That report was intended to contain practical recommendations on how farmers could reduce their emissions. Oh yeah, the old cows farting chestnut. The then Zero Carbon Bill was introduced to Parliament on the 8th of May. The report by the Interim Climate Change Committee only came out on the 17th of July. That left farming organisations scrambling to address two overlapping issues at the same time. I bet they were panicking. The Minister for Climate Change, James Shaw, was asked last week about this apparent confusion by a member of the youth lobbying group Generation Zero from the Greta Thunberg School of Critical Thinking and Analysis. Yes, that's the youth lobby group, Generation Zero. Well, they got that right, yeah. They are Generation Zero. They are absolutely zero intelligence. But never mind. I think your question implies a level of joined-up government that doesn't actually exist, Mr. Shaw said. No, I think it implies a level of joined-up thinking that doesn't exist. And he says that is actually a coincidence rather than design. Well, that's easy for you to say, isn't it, Mr. Shaw? Mr. Shaw was then asked why the report by the Interim Climate Change Committee was withheld from the public for about a month. Here's his answer. We've had, as a government, some experiences recently where we have released independent reports without our response. Does that make any sense to you? I keep telling you, these people are not there to serve you. I think that was proof. That has created something of a vacuum, he said. Yes, the vacuum, the one that he carries around in his head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is how he gets his pay packet. That has created something of a vacuum to project their for the National Party. This is this party with Malcolm Roberts in it, who's actually been completely derided by presenting facts with people who know about climate change, such as Tony Heller, to their government and standing up there and telling them of their own lies, telling them that their government lies and propaganda are not true. You can see it on YouTube, but they're just conspiracy theories. So don't listen to what I say. Listen to Zero Generation, the carbon neutral kids. Yeah. It says that has created something of a vacuum for the National Party, in brackets, to project their howling demons and create a level of opposition that is not founded in fact. Well, I'm afraid it is, Mr. Shaw. Get your fat nose back in its fat trough. And remember, your pay packet depends on the vacuum inside your head at all times. Mr. Shaw said it was better to release the report and the government's response at the same time. But Federated Farmers climate change spokesman for cows farting, Chris Lewis, said this was not good enough. It's a bit disappointing that Federation Farmers has to make strong submission on behalf of its members before it has all the evidence in front of it. Well, you're never going to get the evidence because there isn't any. The director of the Institute of Public Administration of New Zealand, the public sector watchdog, described the government's handling of this as kind of messy. But the world is never perfect, it says, and you do your best with the hand you have been dealt, with your nose in the trough and your blinkers on. Thank you very much. So, you do remember our latest show, don't you? One of our latest shows, 5G and Glastonbury Town Council and the festival rollout. You know, the festival rollout of this new 5G technology. Well, this is following on from that because we've been talking about this idea that somehow Switzerland has stopped 5G when it's actually the opposite. This article was quoted from Swiss.info at the time. Peter Kalin, president of the Basel-based Doctors for Environmental Protection Group, which I've looked at their stuff, it's very good, is warning that 5G uses very short wave, which will be absorbed by the skin. He adds the skin is already exposed to the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. 5G could present an extra cancer risk, but don't try telling that to your local cabinet member for the environment because they've already rolled it out. And they're saying that the World Health Organization says it's safe, so it must be, mustn't it? Well, it's got to be, hasn't it? Nose back in the trough, blinkers on, please. However, this is from Physicians for Safer Technology. The first reported injury of 5G in a news report comes from Switzerland, where 5G has been launched in 102 locations. The weekly French-language Swiss magazine Lustre interviewed people living in Geneva after the 5G rollout with alarming details of illness. In their article, with 5G, we feel like guinea pigs, that's the name of the article, which was posted on July 18th, 2019, they report neighbours met to discuss their many common symptoms and many unanswered questions. Good luck getting those questions answered. Digital and wireless devices have provided many benefits, it says here. However, we are now realising that the rapid adoption of this novel technology, it's novel, is it, to have a mobile phone, has not been accompanied by adequate regulation, monitoring or safety precautions. You don't say. This is from Swiss.info again. Swiss cantons do not have the legal authority to unilaterally impose moratoriums on the installation of the fifth generation mobile communications network, the Federal Office of Communications Ofcom has stated. The cantons of Geneva, Jura, Neuchâtel and Vaud are reported to have declared or to be considering a moratorium on 5G antennas. The issue is also reportedly on the agenda in Bern, St. Gallen and Schwich. But an Ofcom external link spokesman told the Sonntagszeitung newspaper on Sunday that the federal authorities alone are responsible for determining the health risks to the public. So all of the people out there who are wasting their time thinking that local councils have anything to do with this, get your head onto the bigger picture, because that's where it should be, unless you want to keep your nose in the trough like those you are addressing. Therefore, no option for cantonal or communal regulations to protect people from mobile phone system radiation. Okay, that's what it says. The enactment of such regulation would be contrary to the law. A lawyer told the newspaper that local authorities only have powers to prevent the erection of individual masts if they fall foul of planning regulations. Now, this is really interesting because all these virtue signalling non-entities such as MP Stella Creasy, I pointed out over 10 years ago to her that a Vodafone mast, which was very near to my house, although thankfully not that near, but very near to several schools and hundreds of people's properties, had been turned down in a public debate. Yet 3 months it was there. It had been turned down. The planning had been turned down. So even if the planning's turned down, they'll still put them in. So if Stella Creasy starts to virtue signal about 5G, that will come back to bite her directly where it needs, well, where she needs to be bitten. Because these virtue signalling politicians are absolutely vile. However, little rant over. I have reported on the press and police, which is the important bit. The rest is just distraction. That's the main thing about this show. Go back to that YouTube thing. It's also on BitChute about what happened with that libelling of local citizens by those people who are meant to represent them in local government, plus the police, and of course your local press, your local community press, folks, which is run by a huge multinational company. So I stick to the facts, and a lot of people don't like it, but one of them was also talking about common law courts. Now, I think I brought this up at the beginning of the show. This basically is the world of Judge Unicorn and the self-appointed jury of 12 imaginary leprechauns. It was real in my mind, so it happened. Yeah, okay. Try telling that to the real judge. But this is from globalresearch.ca. The Swiss government sold 5G licenses to mobile phone providers for a total of $373 million US. Last month, state-owned telecoms company Swisscom went live with its 5G network. Swisscom CEO Urs Schaeppi has criticised the proposed moratoriums as being in violation of federal law. So anyone who tells you that Switzerland has turned down 5G is an idiot and should be working and may be working for your local clown show. Your local clown show. You know that clown show that you pay council tax to? Them. In the past month, it says, official resolutions against 5G have been adopted by the cantons of Geneva, Vaud, Jura and Neuchâtel in Switzerland. These are the first 4 Swiss regions to pass ordinances against 5G installation, it says here. But, of course, it didn't mean anything. Despite that, the majority, state-owned Swisscom, defied these laws on April 17th. What a surprise, when they activated 5G stations in 102 locations in Switzerland, as we've said earlier. So, as reported by the local.ch, that's the website, local.ch, under Swisscom's plans, more than 90% of the population will be covered by the end of 2019, said the company in its statement. One of the core concerns is the number of extra antennas that will be needed. 5G can only transmit short distances, one reportedly every 10 to 12 metres. This is going to be fun, isn't it? Experts are urging the EU to follow Resolution 1815 of the Council of Europe, asking for, intervention, I think it says here. It's been reported on the press and police. If a law, let's just skip down to this. If a law prevents a company from deploying their agenda because of harm to others, but the company does it anyway, and somehow the company and its executive escape, if they escape immediate judicial or police action, then the rule of law is no longer in effect, it says here. Well, this is what I'm saying, that only a return to natural justice and natural law by removing this will ever work. The whole of the planet is under occupation by change agents, basically. Let's call them the change agents that work on behalf of the sons of the Nephilim or the daughters of the Nephilim. It doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? Those that inbred with the daughters of men. How far do you want to take this? But this is from Physicians for Safe Technology. Widespread use of digital media and near constant exposure to wireless devices has caused increasing concern among scientists, healthcare professionals, psychologists, educators, and the public, who are now considering this is not only a public health issue, but a looming public health crisis. It appears that we are at the same point of emerging science, similar to early recognition of health impacts associated with tobacco, asbestos, coal dust and lead. Well, look how long it took them to get round to asbestos. These concerns are amplified by industry proposals for a massive expansion of wireless infrastructure and connectivity. Through both social science and observation, we are learning that there are significant adverse health, psychosocial, environmental, privacy and security issues associated with the use of this modern technology. Oh well. Let's get on to more important things, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're getting the gist of this, that the answer to all this has got to be something different. And this abomination is going to be rolled out. And I think maybe we should go back to pre-mobile phone history. Maybe just get rid of them all and try and get out of a city while you can before they stop you travelling. That's a conspiracy theory, though. But let's get on to more important things. Yes, St. Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg has been awarded the first Normandy Freedom Prize. That's ironic, isn't it? So this 16-year-old kid with Asperger's is enslaving the planet on the back of the Normandy Freedom Prize. Swedish teenage climate Swedish teenage climate lobbyist and Nobel Peace Prize nominee, you couldn't make this up, could you? Greta Thunberg was awarded the first Normandy Freedom Prize, sponsored by World War II veterans Charles Norman Shea and Léon Gautier in the French city of Caen. The Fridays for Future strike movement came to prominence through the then 15-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who conducted a solitary protest outside the Swedish Parliament in 2018, which was then quickly used by the propaganda company, the PR company, which her parents have a hand in and is linked to the climate change agenda. We've reported on all this stuff. So the poor PR puppet, the Asperger's autism puppet, poor little Greta Thunberg, has been used by globalists. Well, who'd have thought, eh? So, as Per in Sweden said earlier on, there's a little recipe baked into this pie. Let's see now. If you want to be famous, first develop a good case of autism. I already have, by the way. I'm totally autistic now. Then channel your anger. Well, I'm doing that as well. I'm no longer accepting useful idiots. I've got rid of 2 this week. Just by channeling my anger. You can do it too. It's a great way of letting off steam. It really is. And the late Bill Cooper was actually saying that in that talk that I referred to earlier on. He said, I'm not a bad person, but I can't stand fools anymore. There just isn't time. I've reached that point. I've reached that point too. And many people I know have as well. So this raises many challenges and questions for physicians. Yes, it certainly does. Yes, we get back onto the 5G. It says, the Swiss physician denounces 5G and calls for a 5G moratorium. Well, he did, but Dr. Bertrand Buchs, who also called for a 5G moratorium, states he has seen more and more patients with similar symptoms. Now, this is quite interesting, actually, because there are symptoms already arising. He says, in this case, our authorities are going against common sense. Well, they're not actually. There's no common sense there. And they're just going with something. They're not going against anything. It said in this article, written by Dr. Bertrand Buchs, quoting him, in Switzerland, we could open a line for people who feel bad. Listen to these complaints and examine them. Yeah, we have it here. It's called the Samaritans, actually. Our country has the means and the skills. The debate must be launched, he says. So, there you go. Swisscom. Yeah, loads of new opportunities for residential customers and business across Switzerland. 5G is the new mobile communication standard for digitisation, enabling the extremely fast connection of millions of devices, things and people. Yes, it's interesting. However, as a side issue, the New York Times and CBS reported unexplained symptoms in diplomats living in China and Cuba in 2017 and 2018. The source was found to be microwave radiation. Who'd have thought? US San Diego professor of medicine, Dr. Beatrice Golomb, published an article in Neural Computation in September 2018 discussing the symptoms of the diplomats living abroad. You could look into that. But you can give it to your council and they're going to bin it anyway. The symptoms that diplomats and their families experienced, sleep problems, headaches, strange auditory sounds, anxiety and dizziness were similar to those with microwave illness, reported in military studies from pulsed microwave radiation, which is what 5G is, millimeter wave radiation. And of course they have the active denial system. Look that one up. That is basically millimeter waves that are boosted at crowds of people and basically burn them so they have to run away. I suppose it's a bit like the burning of heretics, apart from the fact you don't have to abjure your beliefs, you just have to run away quick. Yes, so I think that's just about it from that, but let's just get into something else which is very important. While extremist, leftist, authoritarian groups like Antifa are left alone by the state, any resistance to the new totalitarianism is quashed by the state's interference. Isn't this just true? The state are Antifa. The ideologies of those who use Twitter as a virtue signalling hotspot are the same. They are working to take away all your rights and blind you with lies which are so blatant. Those who call these the end times must be right, or left, or liberal. It really doesn't matter. They're all controlled by the same forces, one force, one agenda. One love, one world, one government. The same goes for the totalitarian Extinction Rebellion with its fluffy nonsense exterior of die-ins at Waitrose for the entitled few, those who believe The Guardian is a newspaper and Greta Thunberg is an activist. Yet the inner core of Extinction Rebellion, this is something I want to get onto, because it's the same as your local council, it's the same as the police, it's the same as any government organisation, except they don't call them that. But in Extinction Rebellion and in the previous George Soros takeover of Occupy, they had their own inner core of, wait for it, yes, dragons. Have a look at our show, Extinction Rebellion, The Facts. Yes, we reported about them on there, and we actually printed some of the emails. Yet the inner core of Extinction Rebellion is full of these sinister dragons, which we have reported on. Yes, they are the same dragons which operated at the centre of George Soros' takeover of Occupy, and your local Stasi, exactly wherever it is, it operates the same. So let's see what happened when a real climate activist and a friend of mine wrote asking some questions to Janto the Dragon. Well, actually, it was to the ER Core team. And it was from Janto the Dragon at protonmail.com. And the reply was this. Wow, this is rather bizarre. Who on earth is this Tim character? He sounds quite confused for someone with so much experience. Only joking. We've been reading all about you this morning. Now, this is really interesting because I've had similar threats from people who were involved in these lobbying groups connected to councils. They actually think that they can get away with sending you implied threats. And maybe it's about time that they found out that it wasn't and people took action against these idiots. However, Janto the Dragon carried on. Time to take a step back, Tim, and stop speculating wildly. Well, as Tim had just sent him some questions and some facts, it's a very strange response. Yeah, you're going to love this if you know how it works. This is the next paragraph from Janto the Dragon. We've had a quick consensus meeting this morning at Dragon Base. Yes, using Delphi technique and facilitators, of course, which is what your local council do. And they said, our affinity group think... actually, it should say our affinity group think, but it says our affinity group think that Tim should issue a full retraction as soon as he's slept for long enough for his brain to be working again. They can't get away from this very petty-minded kind of insult and nastiness. It's always there in these extreme leftists. It's there in their privileged hate-filled privilege. Anyway, it says, please don't make me have to bring in another agent. Another agent? What, another change agent? That would be Dragon Alpha. She's the coordinator of the new action group. I should mention at this point that this is a legal action group. Well, as you're above the law, it doesn't make any difference, does it? Because what you've done is above the law and it's above the government. So we know that you're in charge. And it says she has a law degree, unlike myself and Dragon Echo, but has she got a brain cell? No, not a functioning one, obviously, because we know the sort of lawyers that work for Extinction Rebellion, Farhana Yamin. You know, this woman is legally qualified and glued herself to the Shell building. Say no more. However, it says, regards Dragon Tango. This was from I thought it said AI, Artificial Intelligence Williams, but it's not. Al.Williams at googlemail.com wrote, I'm looping in Janto, who set up a new affinity group recently. They're really interested in the conversation. Blythe and Claire, please bear with us while Janto makes their entry into the conversation. It will protect and strengthen the XR position. This is a precursor to all this. Having now read further, this Tim character doesn't seem to understand how out of depth he is. Get this, you're going to love this one. He is meddling with people he does not understand. No, he's meddling with people who don't understand anything. He said, I reckon we can resolve this before Boxing Day. Look how far they were ahead at that time. So basically it goes on and on and on and on and on. And they try and talk about other things when they don't get down to it. These are the epitome of the cartoon Nazis depicted by the extreme left. In fact, they are much, much worse. Their 1984 programmed language, mixed with sinister threats and menaces, is the New World Order on propaganda steroids. There's no doubt about it. So in conclusion, this is my only gift for this evening, and it's a mission statement. Put it on your emails to your council and at least make them aware that you are aware of what they are really up to. Few people are using this. Do your own version of it. This is for anyone who wants to take on any kind of totalitarian body, whether it's the council, the police, or whoever. We are an unaffiliated group of local residents concerned about the lack of democratic process in local government planning and policy. We will remain unaffiliated as individuals acting collectively and within the law towards a truly inclusive democratic process where all voices are heard. We are not affiliated with any group or organisation whatsoever. This does not mean that we do or do not endorse other groups. We do not agree with arriving at a, in inverted commas, consensus through being steered into predetermined outcomes by trained facilitators either working for the council or public-private partnerships. We deem this to be against the public interest and an affront to democracy. Now we know that we're in a post-democratic, post-truth world, but this mission statement keeps them out of your individual business, and it also stops them from slandering groups, which is what this whole thing's been about. So all of those people out there who slander groups and think they can get away with lying through their back teeth, well, some of us out here are onto you. So that's it from this show. I'll try and lighten up the load for the next one. We've got to have some fun with this. But I hope that was informative. Do catch me at the Glastonbury Symposium on Saturday, the 28th of July. Do come along for that. I need you there because we are facing such opposition and there are so many people who just don't get this. So please come along on Saturday, 28th of July. Sandy Adams is in Totnes on that day if you are in that area. But if you're in the Glastonbury area or can get there, please turn up on the 28th and the 29th when myself and Piers Corbyn will be talking. And Sandy will be there on the Sunday. We are the voices of reason, hopefully, in this clown show. So that's it, everybody. Thanks for listening and good night. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.